It was 3 a.m. of the 8th of August, 1963. A mail train was chugging along from Glasgow to Houston. Had to add that because without unnecessary sound effects, effort is invisible, right? Prayer was being pulled by a chunky Class 40 diesel engine. Basically the semi-truck of British Rail. No passengers, just over 70 postal workers inside who were busy sorting through millions of pounds worth of letters, parcels and what they called high-value packets or HVPs, which is a fancy name for bags stuffed with cash. At crew, poor driver Jack Mills and fireman David Whitby hopped on to take charge of the locomotive. They had no idea it was going to be a bumpy ride. As they rolled up near Sears Crossing around 3 a.m., just outside Leighton Buzzard, the British Railway signalling system was doing its thing. Two key signals were there. The distant signal, basically an early warning, and the home signal, which tells you to stop or go. The distant signal was sitting about 1100 to 1300 yards before the home signal. More than enough runway to start braking if something looked sketchy. And tonight, robbers were in control of signals. The distant signal was at caution, so Mills began slowing down. Then, like a pimple, the home signal popped up red. So Jack Mills pulled the train to a nice neat stop about 5 or 6 yards before the signal gantry at Sears Crossing. Everything textbook. So far, David hopped down to ring up the Leighton Buzzard signal box and see what's going on. Yes, this is our budget 3D fireman. Don't judge, he's doing his best. David discovered the phone wires were slashed. The wires have been cut, he shouted. As he walked back, he spotted someone between the second and third coach, waving him over like, "Hey buddy, come here, I totally work here." The guy was dressed like a postman, which in hindsight was the laziest disguise. So David walked over, hoping for answers like a foolish horror movie character. Meanwhile, a surprise cameo. A masked man in boiler suit and balaclava climbed right up onto the locomotive and smashed poor Jack Mills over the head from behind, knocking him out cold. Well, to us, it's another chapter from history, but for poor Mills, a head massage, no tips required. And just like that, Britain's biggest heist was rolling into action. On the other side of the train, as soon as David got close to Mr. Tootley, a postman, someone shoved him down and cracked him with the cosh. Well, that's a very unorthodox position. Anyways, they took him right back to the engine. Meanwhile, the robbers, a crew so organized it was almost impressive. They started uncoupling the last 10 coaches. Their plan was to take only the loot, skip the postal chaos. Except their stand-in train driver, nicknamed Old Elf, couldn't get the engine moving. So the classic move, they forced the half-dead poor soul Jack Mills to drive the engine forward. Crime pro tip number 1. Always let the pro handle the machinery. Back in the HVP coach, one postal worker heard a hiss of steam from the back and figured, "Oh great, the coupling's busted." But coach had no corridor link with the engine. That's British engineering for you. Then they tried to warn Mills by yanking the communication cord and shouting through windows. Well, good luck with that. Yep, that's your friendly neighborhood postman, heroically yelling into the void. The robbers brought the train to a perfect stop, right at the Glasgow Bridge. One postal worker finally put 2 and 2 together and shouted, "It's a raid!" Immediately, the staff started piling mail bags against the sliding doors. Well, they are postmen, not the Crusade Knights. What do you expect? It would have been totally heroic if the robbers hadn't smashed a window 2 seconds later and yelled, "They are barricading the doors! Get the guns!" Spoiler alert. The guns line was pure intimidation. You have to believe no firearms were actually used in whole operation. 2 men crawled through the broken window waving cautious. Yeah, that's our budget 3D robber putting in Oscar-level effort right there. Honestly, that alone deserves a subscribe. Others barged in through the door. One even had an axe. Because if you are going to terrify postal workers at 3 a.m. on Friday, you better go full Friday the 13th. In mere seconds, 6 to 8 robbers swamped into the HVP coach with others shouting outside like rowdy fans at a football match. One of them cracked Inspector Thomas Cat with a cosh just to set the tone. The rest of the staff hit the floor faster than you could say registered mail. The robbers then formed the world's most illegal human chain, passing mail bags to the truck below. Once they were done, they shoved Mills and David into the coach. One of the robbers offered a very polite parting lie. "Stay here for half an hour. We shall be back." By around 3:30 a.m., the robbers were long gone with all the high-value packets, leaving behind only bruised egos and a trashed train. Finally, when the coast seemed clear, Inspector Cat and postal worker Pan tiptoed out towards the remaining train, who were smoking weed. On the way, they ran into guard Thomas Miller and spilled the entire story. Miller went looking, found Mills and David still rattled, and by about 4:25 a.m., he flagged down a passing train near Chuddington to alert the authorities. 4 main squads jumped on the case. Scotland Yard's Flying Squad, Buckinghamshire Constabulary, the local force, not quite Sherlock but eager, British Transport Police, these guys handled railways, and the Post Office Investigation Branch, who may be signed up to chase missing stamps, not full-scale heist. At 8:30 a.m., Detective Constable Keith Milner from Bucks rolled up to Bredigo Bridge. Detective is a kind of a man who could solve your love life quicker than your case. In his report, he listed these items: 2 rods wrapped in a white cloth, a railwayman's cap, a long crowbar, 4 6-volt batteries, and a glove stuffed with a piece of black paper which was used to sabotage the signal. By 10:30 a.m., Scotland Yard was on high alert. They threw up roadblocks across a 30-mile radius. And here's our not quite BBC map of the 30-mile radius. Fancy, right? But they already had a massive head start. But here's what it gets spicy. That little line from one of the robbers, "Wait here for half an hour," accidentally gave police their best theory, the 30-minute clue. Enough time for robbers to drive just far enough to vanish but stay close enough to remain invisible. Basically it told, hey, maybe check the local hideouts before chasing ghosts across the country. Crime pro tip number 2. Don't tell people exactly when you will be back. You are robbing, not colonizing. The post office wasn't just counting what they lost. They also wanted to know how the heck this was even possible. On August 9th, senior GPO officials dropped a little bombshell. Turns out 3 specially secured HVP coaches, basically the armored trucks of the rail world, had been all out of service right before the robbery. Each one down with the mechanical issues at the same time, which sure might have been pure British bad luck. Crime pro tip number 3. If you have an inside man, maybe try not to make it obvious. With this information, coincidence started sounding more like an invitation. Meanwhile, during police interviews, a London antiques dealer named Bernard Makowski piped up. Months earlier, he said he had been approached to help plan a 7 million bullion heist at King's Cross. That job never happened, but Makowski was dead sure it was the same crew who knocked over the train. He even claimed multiple gangs from Soho, Angel and Elephant and Castle teamed up for it. Problem? No physical evidence. So at this point, it was still cool story, Bernard. Crime pro tip number 4. Don't tell the antiques guy your evil master plan. Despite combing the countryside with over 80 officers, police somehow missed the actual hideout because it was just outside the fancy 30-mile search circle. The place was called Leather Slade Farm, basically the gang's Airbnb. The tip came from multiple locals. On August 11th, someone at an Oxfordshire club casually mentioned Rickson's place in Oakley, recently sold, acting suspicious. Tips were ignored. Obviously, why would you follow the most useful lead? Because you are busy utilizing useful leads to colonize. But on August 13th, Sergeant Blackman and PC Holy finally decided to check it out. Finally, someone wise. They drove to the farm, curtains still drawn, no signs of life. Inside, as Detective Superintendent Malcolm said, one big clue. Farm was robbers' crash pad, party house, planning bunker, all rolled into one. Congrats lads, you just found the jackpot. So while police were piecing together what went down inside Leather Slade Farm, they also started looking around its sleepy countryside neighborhood. Turns out 5 locals had witnessed some of the weird rural circus. Each one saw or heard something of odd cars, strange faces, suspiciously vague chats. The kind of stuff that will make you lock your shed twice. But none of it was solid enough to shout, "Train robbers!" Well, this is Detective Superintendent MacArthur. He looks like a detective who knows where the bodies are buried, because he put them there. He started pulling on a new thread. How did these guys even get the farm? Because let's be real, shady crooks don't usually file clean paperwork. Leather Slade had belonged to Bernard Rickson. He sold it to Midland Marts Limited, run by Douglas Earl over in Bicester. Earl, being the trusting soul he was, never actually met the buyer. He just got a letter, a £555 deposit check, and thought, yeah, seems legit. The check came from the account of James and Wheater, which led straight to solicitor John Peter. Look at him. His face and body language are screaming, "Your Honor, I didn't molest anyone." The supposed buyer Leonard Field hadn't signed a single document. This Leonard guy looks like a stepbrother of Joker. Wheater signed everything for the Joker, asked no question because who needs signature when you have got that sweet client money? Crime pro tip number 6. Sign your own documents or hire a solicitor with an actual spine. When police pressed Wheater, he did the classic shrug. No personal ties with Field, never visited the farm, definitely did not notice any getaway tax. You only met his managing clerk, Brian Field. Well, with that puppy face, you can only fool your wife. But here's the kicker. Under gentle grilling, Wheater's story cracked. He first claimed Brian Field was not tied to the farm. Yet, earlier that summer in a call with Rickson, he had explicitly said Brian Field had been there. Oops. Credibility down the bench. Tracing Brian Field led detectives to 150 Earls Court Road, a once notorious slum property tied to Peter Rackman. After Rackman's death, the building was mid-sale to new buyers, Anthony Dean, Brian Hawking and Donald Williams. Dean bailed out, so a convenient little shell company, Gilt Slade Investments Limited, popped up to seal the deal. On August 14th, days after the robbery, Hawking signed the papers, then casually told the police he wasn't really buying it, just fronting for someone. Maybe Wheater, maybe Bigfoot, maybe King Kong, maybe Godzilla, he would not say. Crime pro tip number 7. Use shell companies to buy planning hubs. Oh, I forgot to mention, on 12th of August, Detective Chief Superintendent Tommy Butler took over the case. He was the local Sherlock Holmes. On the morning of August 16th, a clerk named John Aaron and his wife were strolling near Cold Harbor on Dorking Road when they stumbled on something you definitely don't see every day. 3 suitcases just lying there side by side, like lost tourists. Inside were the neatly bundled stacks of crisp 1-pound banknotes, all held together with brown adhesive bands. It did not take a genius to put 2 and 2 together. Hey, this might be that little Great Train Robbery thing all over the papers. They flagged down a passing car because apparently mobile phone had not been invented yet and got someone to contact the police. Detective Inspector Basil West from Surrey Police rolled up with DC Alexander Illing, who will handle the forensic work. We could not find their pictures, so we cannot judge them. Let's just say they were Hackle and Jekyll of the Surrey Police. They collected the bags, then about 50 yards deeper in the brush, they found a 4th suitcase carefully tucked away because, pro-level hiding. Inside were more bundles of cash. But that was not even the real jackpot. In one of these cases was a hotel bill made out of her and Frau Field. It pointed to the Sonnenbickel Hotel in Hindlang, Germany, with dates from February 2nd to 16th, 1963. Lovely winter getaway. Too bad it was no evidence. Lacey Ailing worked his forensic magic and lifted 13 prints from the bags. One stood out. A confirmed hit on our buddy Brian Field. So now Field was not just a name on the dusty legal documents. He was physically connected to the cash. Crime pro tip number 8. Maybe don't leave the vacation receipts in your crime loot. Originally, the cleanup after the heist was supposed to be handled by a guy named William Still. We got no pictures of him, but I'm sure he looks like Beetlejuice. He was promised a tidy slice of the pie. Easy money for tidying up the farmhouse. Except, Beetlejuice and his 3 buddies were busted in June, caught with tools, explosives, and the worst poker faces. Bye-bye cleanup crew, so our buddy Brian Field stepped in. He already knew the score, had been to the farm with Leonard Field, chatted up Mrs. Rickson during the sale. He figured out he could clean the place without raising alarms. Plot twist, he could not. By now, detectives were sitting on a 22-page statement detailing our buddy Field's entire involvement. His fingerprints were literally on bags stuffed with stolen cash, and there was Germany. Sure, his wife was German. Seemed innocent enough, but their hotel stay gave it away. So while London detectives were knee-deep in fingerprints and legal paper trails, a totally different thread started unraveling down in Bournemouth. And honestly, it was like a low-budget spin-off where the crooks wrote their own downfall. On August 10th, Roger Caudry packed up his share of loot and left Leatherslade Farm. He met up in Oxford with an associate, Bill Ball, to stash the cash. Well, this coterie has an uncanny resemblance with Herb the Perv, and the Bill looks like a guy who will struggle spelling his own name. Both of these criminal masterminds picked the world's sketchiest way to stash the cash. Ball answered a local newspaper ad for garage space. That ad led him to 67-year-old Emily Clark, a sweet widow of former policeman. So you can imagine how slick this looked. Crime pro tip number 9. If you are hiding stolen millions, maybe don't do it through the classified. Try literally anything else. Ball offered 3 months rent upfront. All in cash, too generous, too fast. Mrs. Clark might have been polite, but she was not clueless. She handed over the keys, but then immediately called the police. Cops swooped in, and on August 14th, they found a car parked at 45 Tweedale Road, stuffed with 56,047 pounds. Herb the Perv did another pervy thing. He hid the car key up his ass, but suffering from discomfort and pain, he confessed. Very out of character for a perv. The key was removed on 14th August at 1:15 p.m. It's been more than 60 years and police still have this pervy incident recorded with exact time when dog had spatula in his ass. So that key opened another car in a garage at 59 Ansbury Avenue, which led to 78,982 pounds. Then they checked the flat at 935 Wimborne Road, found another 5,910 pounds just chilling. Grand total of 141,017 pounds were recovered with the shitty key, obviously. Cornered by the inevitable coterie, and Ball confessed. Yeah, the cash was from the train job. Bournemouth was supposed to be a hideaway. Instead, it turned into a clearance sale for stolen parts. Crime pro tip number 10. Don't do pervy things. Police files will make sure they haunt you till the end of the world. So here's how the investigation really turned into a clown car of criminal screw-ups. On August 13th, a woman waltzed into a clothing store in Reargate and handed out 26 51-pound notes. Sales assistant Mary took one look and thought, wow, did these come out of a coal mine? Mary is the kind of a woman who tells your wife that you are cheating. When the woman refused to give an address and bolted out, Mary did what she do best, stabbing in the back. She memorized the license plate REN22 on their Austin Healey, then called the police. Crime pro tip number 11. Maybe launder your money before laundering, or stay away from sales lady. Police traced the car to James Edward Patton, who also went by James White. It looks like he has got Diddy on speed dial. Apparently the man had more fake names than my income. He and his partner posing as Mr. and Mrs. Ballard were linked to a caravan site in Colvally. James Patton, first fake name, Mr. Ballard second. Let's keep counting. Inside that caravan, police found 136 pound in grubby 1 pound notes. Okay, not impressive, but it got better. The REN22 Austin Healey became a hot item for investigators. It was bought on August 9th for 900 pounds in 5-pound notes, registered under the very creative fake name John Stewart. Well, it's the third one. By the way, the car was later ditched. Police picked it up on August 21st. When police gave the caravan another look, they discovered a hidden panel. Classic movie move with more than 30,000 pounds neatly stashed inside. The cash was handed over to D.S. Garrett on August 20th. Obviously, buried things belong to him. But White was not done fake naming. He is out to set a world record. On the same day he bought REN22, he hit up checkered flag sports car and snagged the second Austin Healey 3000 for 835 pounds, all in cash. The name on the paperwork? This time it was Mrs. Mary Manson from Mitcham Lane. Meanwhile, forensics were not wasting time. On August 19th, they matched fingerprints from the caravan and other scenes to both James White and Lily Mercy Price, also known as Chitty White. Because of course he had an alias too. Crime pro tip number 12. If you are using fake names, maybe try remembering which one you used where. Or keep a spreadsheet. On August 22nd, everything came crashing down, for the robbers at least. The big break started with the arrest of Charles Wilson, the gang's finance manager. Wilson looks like a guy who gives free candies to the kids. At exactly 12:55 p.m., Detective Sergeant Nigel Reed and Inspector Byers knocked on the door at 45 Crescent Lane. Wilson answered like he was expecting the candy, calm as ever. When they confirmed who he was, he just shrugged. I did not think you would. Inside the house, police found all sorts of suspicious souvenirs. Black cream shoes labeled John White, not shady at all. A pair of police-issued trousers, because what self-respecting robot does not cosplay as the law? A blue pair of denim jeans, 10 pounds in cash inside a cushion, and burnt clothing remnants in the garden. Crime pro tip number 13. If you are gonna burn the evidence, dispose of the ashes too. Wilson insisted he had nothing to do with the mail train robbery. The items are total coincidences. The ashes? Maybe he just had a bad laundry day. That same afternoon at 2:50 p.m., DS Tommy Butler, very cheeky detective, and Chief Inspector Baldock sat Wilson down. Told him flat out he was a suspect in the Chennington mail heist. Wilson denied everything. Said he did not even know where Leather Slade Farm was. But he did admit reading about it in the papers. Who hadn't? When they pressed him on his whereabouts during the robbery, Wilson claimed he was at Spitalfields Market around 5 a.m. buying apples. Definitely not robbing cranes. Later at Aylesbury police station, Wilson was formally charged. His response was pure movie script. You won't make it stick. Not without the poppy. And you won't find that. But here's the kicker. The case did not hinge only on stacks of stolen cash. That same day, under pressure, Yard released photos of the top suspects to the public. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind, Charles Wilson, the finance manager, and James White, the shapeshifter. By August 22nd, the British press was a feeding frenzy. Police had suspects locked up, mug shots slashed up on the front pages, and the public glued to the headlines. But Gordon Goody the Ghost was not even featured in the big Scotland Yard photo appeal, which was almost impressive because he was very much on the Yard's radar. He was a known buddy of Bruce Reynolds, close with Charles Wilson, basically the quiet kid at school. While Wilson was being nabbed over in Clapham, Goody was already slipping out of London. First stop, the Windmill Public House near Blackfriars. Because if you are about to disappear, why not grab a pint first? Then he vanished north on the M1. Crime pro tip number 14. Always stay hydrated before your manhunt. The quiet kid finally broke silence and wrote to an old frenemy, Mr. Osborne, a police officer who had tangled with him in the London airport robbery case. The latter's tone, nervous, defensive, desperate. He insisted he was not hiding, just keeping away for his own safety. Denied the train robbery flat out, but admitted he figured the police would still pin it on him. Dropped sad lines about how the last case wrecked him financially and mentally. Not begging for sympathy, but you could smell it between the lines. On August 23rd, Goody got flagged at a Leicester hotel when someone mistook him for Bruce Reynolds. Leicester police hustled him to headquarters and Chief Inspector Vibart rolled in to start the grilling. Goody's story was not exactly airtight. He claimed he had been living above the Windmill pub earlier that month, then popped off to Ireland on August 2nd, but could not remember exactly where in Ireland he had stayed. Which sure is pretty normal, blacking out entire countries from the memory. By midnight, our sneaky Tommy Butler took the wheel. He zeroed in on the gaps and contradictions, but Goody stuck to his script. Total denial. With no fingerprints, no solid evidence, just a lot of very suspicious vibes, police could not make it stick. At 12:15 a.m. on August 25th, Goody was released, but not entirely off the hook. They ordered him to report back to Aylesbury police station on September 7th. They gave him a personal police escort home, basically like an Uber but with more handcuffs in the glove box. For now, Gordon Goody was free, but that shadow of Scotland Yard, it was not going anywhere. By late August, Scotland Yard had already ticked off a decent to-do list. Arrest robbers? Done. Recover cash? Done. Find sketchy countryside hideouts? Done. But one huge question still haunted the top detectives at the yard. How did the gang know so much? The precise timing, the exact train location, even the number of mailbags on board. This was not just lucky criminal guessing. So on August 29th, top brass gathered at Scotland Yard that day. An informant dropped a bomb. He rattled off 14 people allegedly linked to the heist. But the real jaw-dropper was the claim that 2 post office employees had each pocketed £145,000 to spill sensitive details. Guess what's that one familiar name on the list? Our buddy Brian Field. According to the snitch, Field got his hands on insider HPP schedules and funneled them to Bruce Reynolds, who then used them to script the robbery. Gordon Goody supposedly received a neat little message at Leather Slade Farm, telling them exactly how many bags would be on the train and when. Except When investigators dug deeper, things got messy. The supposed tip-off mentioned 100 bags, but records from the crew showed only 91 bags were actually loaded. Still, the inside man theory wouldn't die. Another rumor popped up. A post office worker on the train might have leaked info to his brother, described vaguely as Irish. Of course, the classic racist out. Scotland Yard scrambled to check 16 post office employees on that route. Laser focused on anyone with Irish family ties and brothers. Every single lead hit a wall. Zero luck. Then a name emerged. Thomas Foley. Maybe detectives read it as Thomas Fowley, except small problem. As of August 8th, he was already behind bars. So it was unlikely he was phoning in heist updates from a prison payphone. Finally, eyes turned to the Penn family. Remember the Penn with Inspector Ket? Leslie Oliver Penn was on the HBP coach the night of the robbery. Two of his brothers, William and Cyril, had criminal records, and a third brother, John Owen Penn, drove a lorry, which was suspicious enough for the investigators. Some detectives believed John might have made a crucial phone call from Warrington that tipped off the gang about the real bag count. So, about that phone call. If it ever happened, it would have been made between 11 p.m. and midnight, right as the train rolled through Warrington. But guess what? No calls were logged from Warrington at that time on robbery night. So the Big Penn brothers conspiracy file slapped shut. Turns out not every shady family gathering equals the heist hotline. While the headlines were all about the crew that physically grabbed the money, the real story was quietly playing out elsewhere through a shadowy network that shuffled cash, whispered coded messages, and kept the big fish nice and hidden. Right at the center of that spiderweb, Albert Milbank, more like a milkman. He is the kind of man who believes father should breastfeed. Not a plain robber, but just as critical, a mover, fixer, ghost in the machine. Milkman was a known friend of Bruce Reynolds. He wasn't busted at Leatherslade Farm with the rest of the muddy boots. He was gliding around London streets, dodging police tails, dropping by secret flats, and talking like a noir movie extra. One address in particular, 85 Hermitage Court, turned out to be less of a tiny bachelor flat and more of a criminal operation headquarters. Police surveillance caught cryptic phone calls there. Get clothes ready. We will arrive in the morning. Take it across the road. Put it in the fridge. Translation: our loot needs a chain. One of the last big catches came on 4th September on the hands of D.I. Frank Williams. Frank looks like a fancy-packed Shaolin monk. He arrested Ronald Biggs. Well, Biggie is one of those flat earthers. At first, they nearly wrote him off. Maybe he confused the police with his theories. But fingerprints linked him directly to the Leatherslade Farm. When asked where he was the night of the robbery, Biggie did not even flinch. Cool, casual, borderline smug. I'm not saying. I'll keep that up my sleeve. Detectives had originally thought Jack Mez, the poor train driver who got clogged, was supposed to drive the train further. But it was Biggie who revealed that they actually brought in his own ringer, an ex-railway driver known as Old Elf, who we all know couldn't move the train. My man basically showed up for FIFA and forgot how to tie his laces. Crime pro tip number 15. Maybe give your stand-in driver a quick refresher, before the heist. Over the next 2 weeks, Scotland Yard basically went on a shopping spree. First up, James Hussey, grabbed on 7th of September. He looks like he will molest your grandpa. He denied everything, but a palm print at Leatherslade Farm said, oops. Crime pro tip number 16. Gloves exist. Then came Thomas Wisby. He actually looks like Sopranos. On 11th September, he rang up Scotland Yard himself and offered to meet. There's a criminal parallel of sending the cops a LinkedIn invite. At 12:15 p.m., he was interviewed by Cheeky Butler. Wisby denied knowing Leatherslade, Brill, Oakley, or any of the arrested men, except James Hussey. For that one, apparently the memory worked. His alibi was at home with family on 7th and 8th of August, or hanging out in South London pub between 9 to 11 p.m. on 7th of August. His two dads, a brother of His dad and two brothers and the pub's licensee William Copeland all backed him up. Except then Copeland pulled a plot twist, later admitting Wisby wasn't actually there at all. Next on the chopping block, Leonard Field, arrested on 14th of September. His mistake was leaving a fingerprint on the farm's sale paperwork. It's always the paperwork. When cops turned up to grill his solicitor John Veter basically melted on the spot, blurted, I'm confused. I thought he was the man at first, but now I'm not certain. Well, good luck with that in the court. By 16th of September, Leonard was charged with conspiracy to rob and obstructing justice. Then on 17th of October, police pulled Veter from his cozy home at 60 Ottersville Lane, charging him with conspiring to stop the mail train, being an accessory, and concealing the true buyer of the Leatherslade Farm. By this stage, most of the headliners are finally behind bars. Roger Colbury, Charles Wilson, Ronald Biggs, Wisby, Hussey, Bryan and Leonard Field. But here's the kicker. Only half of the gang was actually caught. And even worse, most of the money gone. Roughly £2.3 million in stolen notes simply vanished. Banks only had serials on 15,000 of the £5 notes, which means most of that cash was practically untraceable. Finally, the last big piece clicked in when Gordon Goody got re-arrested on 3rd October. November, he had been let go in August, but police were patient. They pulled new evidence. Yellow paint from the Windmill pub on Goody's shoes matched the traces at Leather Slade. A jacket with the same paint found at Bill Bowles' house doubled down on the case. Goody admitted, yeah, the shoes were his, but loaned them to someone else. That line might have worked if Butler wasn't staring him down. So DCS Butler charged him outright with robbing a mail tag. Crime pro tip number 17. Maybe wear disposable shoes to your high-profile heist. With Gordon Goody now in custody, the spotlight fell on Bruce Reynolds, Buster Edwards, Jimmy White, Roy James, John Daly, Bob Welsh. Reynolds had already been declared wanted on 22 August, and after that, he turned living on the run, hopping between London flats, nearly caught in December when police raided his place, only to find a naked man there claiming to be someone else. That's certainly one way to confuse the cops. Reynolds' wife sealed the Oscar by telling police it was her lover, not Bruce. Meanwhile, fingerprints from Roy James later popped up in the kitchen of that same flat, because these guys left fingerprints like shell previews. Meanwhile, the last cozy hideaway was found in rural guest house in Beaufort. There, Bob Welch, Ronald Harvey, Charles Lilly and Danny Pembroke were living their best countryside lives. Hunting, fishing, burning through £5 notes like confetti. Bob Welch already looks like a zookeeper who harasses the elephant. The locals found it odd. So did the police. On 25th of October, Welch was pulled up during a simple ID check. At Scotland Yard, he denied knowing anything. Not the farm, not the gang, not the money. But forensic work tied him to a hotel bill that was key to the planning. Plus, James Hussey fingered him in a lineup. Fingered means pointed, not fingered. 30 minds. Then there was Buster Edwards. He fled all the way to Mexico with his wife and daughter, living on the share of his loot, until the cash ran thin and homesickness set in. In 1966, Buster did what no one expected. He came back, walked right into Scotland Yard, told them he was tired of running and worried for his family. For that little adventure, he was sentenced to 15 years, served 9, and by the 1970s, he was out selling flowers at a stall outside Waterloo Station. From £2.6 million train heist to £2 daffodils, life comes at you fast. Roy James was the gang's wheelman, the adrenaline junkie, tasked with making sure the loot and crew actually got away. Well, I don't think this face needs commenting, but I will. He's the one who farts and blames it on others. The last time he farted, Pluto left the solar system. After the heist, he bolted to St. John's Wood, then melted into hiding. By October 1963, police raided a London home, found hidden cash and robbery-linked items, and the net started tightening. Surveillance and snitches finally led them to James. When police swooped in for the arrest in southwest London, Roy tried to pull off his own budget action movie, just like me doing budget animation, climbing across the rooftops to escape. Spoiler, he slipped straight into the police custody. Crime pro tip number 18. Practice your parkour before the heist, not after. James got 30 years, one of the harshest sentences handed down. He ended up serving around 12 years before being released. By the end of 1963, most of the big names were either arrested, under a microscope or out of the game. Scotland Yard had cracked one of the most tangled crime webs Britain had ever faced. But, and there's always a but, and they didn't find everything. Of the original £2.6 million, over £2.3 million was still missing. Some was stashed, some laundered through clever channels, a lot simply evaporated into the black market. At least we got some great Netflix plots out of it. Take care, bye-bye.